The airport buzzed with the restless rhythm of travel. Footsteps echoed across the polished floor, wheels of suitcases rattled like distant drums, and a faint announcement from the overhead speakers carried through the air. The scent of brewed coffee mixed with the sterile chill of air conditioning, creating that familiar atmosphere where strangers hurried with tired eyes and hopeful hearts. Among the crowd walked a young black woman, her stride quiet yet steady. She wore an oversized black hoodie and dark sunglasses that covered most of her face. Nothing about her screamed attention, no flashy jewelry, no designer handbag. To most eyes, she was just another passenger. She clutched her boarding pass in one hand, Seat 2A, First Class, written in bold black letters. Her steps softened as she approached the boarding gate. She greeted the flight attendant at the door with a polite nod, the kind that carried grace without demanding acknowledgement. The attendant smiled warmly and gestured her inside. The hum of the aircraft welcomed her, the faint mechanical whir of vents, the shuffle of passengers arranging their bags, the squeak of leather seats under shifting bodies. She took a deep breath, as if steadying herself for something more than just a flight. When she reached row 2, her steps stopped. Her seat 2A was occupied. A white man in a crisp navy blazer lounged comfortably against the leather seat. His posture dripped with entitlement, one leg crossed arrogantly over the other. His carry-on bag rested above, his phone in his hand as he scrolled casually, as though the space belonged entirely to him. The woman hesitated for just a moment, then cleared her throat softly. "Excuse me, sir?" The man barely glanced at her. "Yeah, this is my seat, 2A." Her voice was calm, gentle, but firm. The man's lips curled into a mocking smirk. He tilted his head slightly, eyes narrowing as if sizing her up. "This? No, sweetheart. This is my seat." He tapped the armrest with the back of his hand. "Why don't you double-check your ticket? Maybe you're supposed to be back there." His chin jutted toward the crowded economy section behind them. The words landed sharp and dismissive. For a moment, silence wrapped around them. The passengers seated nearby shifted uncomfortably. Some raised their brows, others lowered their gazes, pretending not to witness the confrontation. But their ears strained. They were listening. The woman's hand tightened around her boarding pass, the paper crinkling softly. She inhaled, steadying herself. With a composed voice, she replied, "I'm certain. 2A is mine." The man chuckled, the sound laced with arrogance. "Sweetheart, first class isn't for everyone. Sometimes mistakes happen. Maybe you sneaked up here. Happens all the time." The words stabbed deeper than the tone itself. Yet she stood tall, her silence louder than his insult. At that moment, a flight attendant appeared, noticing the tension. Her smile, once rehearsed and welcoming, shifted into professional seriousness. "Is everything all right here?" she asked, her eyes moving between the two. "This lady seems to think she belongs here," the man said quickly, his voice raised enough for the nearby passengers to hear. "But I assure you she doesn't. Look at her. Do you honestly think she paid for first class?" Gasps rippled softly through the cabin. A man in the third row leaned forward. A woman clutched her handbag tighter. The flight attendant held out her hand. "Sir, may I see your boarding pass?" The man rolled his eyes but handed it over with a dramatic sigh. "Fine, but you'll see I'm right." The attendant checked the ticket, her eyes scanning quickly before glancing at the woman. "And yours, miss?" She handed hers silently. 2 pieces of paper. 2 truths waiting to be revealed. The attendant compared them, her brows furrowing. Finally, she spoke with unwavering clarity. "Sir, your seat is 14C. This young lady's seat is 2A. She's in the right place. You'll need to move." A hush fell over the rows. The sound of the engines preparing outside suddenly felt louder, vibrating faintly through the cabin walls. The man's face reddened, but he leaned back defiantly. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "You're really going to side with her? I've flown more times than you can count. People like her buy fake upgrades to sneak into seats they don't deserve. Don't be fooled." His words hung heavy, dripping with venom. The woman's breath slowed. She slid her sunglasses off, her dark eyes locking onto his. There was no anger in them, only a piercing calm, the kind that unsettles arrogance. For the first time, the man's smirk faltered. He shifted slightly in his seat, caught off guard by her unwavering stare. She spoke quietly, almost like a whisper meant only for him, yet loud enough for those around to hear. "You have no idea who you're speaking to." A shiver ran down the aisle. The man blinked. "And who exactly are you supposed to be?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to, not yet. Her silence stretched, pulling every passenger into the moment. Then, just as the engines outside roared to life, the intercom crackled with the captain's voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to an onboard situation, our departure will be delayed." The entire plane froze, and in that silence, every eye turned to the young woman in seat 2A. The man thought he had silenced her with arrogance. But what he didn't know was that her truth was powerful enough to ground the entire flight. The plane breathed like a restless animal, vents humming, a low tremor pulsing through the floor, a hush that wasn't silence but 1,000 worried thoughts held in people's throats. The announcement had landed like a stone in water. Departure delayed due to an onboard situation. Every ripple of that sentence spread through first class, then farther back, row by row. The young woman in 2A didn't move. She set her sunglasses on the armrest, palms open, breathing even. Calm wasn't weakness here. It was control. Her boarding pass, creased warm from her grip, rested under her thumb as if it were a small passport to dignity. Could you hold still in a moment like this? Would your hands shake? The man in the navy blazer scoffed loud enough for the cabin to hear. "Unbelievable," he muttered, voice soaked in ridicule. "All this for a seat. For her." He tugged at his cufflink, a nervous tick that betrayed his bravado. Around him, eyes flicked and flinched, some wide with curiosity, some narrowed with judgment, some intentionally blank to avoid taking a side. A flight attendant, Olivia, her name tag read, reappeared with another crew member, a tall man with a steady jaw and kind eyes. "Sir," Olivia said, professional but firm, "we need you to move to your assigned seat, 14C. He leaned back, arms folded. "Not going anywhere. Maybe you should move her." He tilted his chin toward the young woman without looking at her, as if she were furniture, not a person. "People like that." Olivia's voice sharpened. "Sir." A thin silence stretched. The overhead bin clicked somewhere, then closed, a small thunderclap in the quiet. The tall attendant, Miguel, spoke evenly. "Refusing to comply with crew instructions can get you removed from the flight." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Authority can be quiet and still fill a room. The man's eyes flashed. "Try it." A phone camera lifted 2 rows back. Then another. The faint chirp of a text sent. A whisper, "Are you recording?" Another, "What happened?" Stories were already being written before the truth had a chance to breathe. Isn't that how it goes? One moment, 10 versions. The young woman turned her face to the window. The glass was cold. Outside, the wing glinted pale silver under a sun hidden by high, white clouds. She watched a baggage cart crawl like a beetle across the tarmac. Her reflection looked back, a composed version of herself she was choosing to be. Inside, grief and fire jostled for space. Not because of a seat, because of the story he decided to tell about her in front of strangers. The intercom crackled again. "Cabin crew, please stand by." The captain's tone was calm but clipped, pilot calm. The kind used when storms are ahead but the path is navigable. Engines spooled down another notch. The aircraft felt suddenly heavy, grounded without moving. Olivia crouched slightly to be at eye level with the young woman. "Miss, are you okay?" she asked softly, a different voice than she used for the man. Human, not scripted. "I'm okay," the young woman said. She measured the words. "But this isn't about okay." Olivia nodded, as if she understood more than training manuals could teach. "We're going to resolve this." A small promise, but it mattered. From row 3, an older gentleman leaned into the aisle. "Let the lady sit." he said, voice trembling with indignation. She has the ticket. That's the rule. End of story. A woman clutching a toddler close whispered. People think they can just... She didn't finish. She didn't need to. The baby's soft coo filled the sentence. The man in the blazer laughed under his breath. Everyone's so emotional. It's simple. First class is for people who belong. The young woman finally turned back to him. Belong. She tasted the word like a foreign thing. You think seats decide who belongs? Money decides, he said, chin lifting. And class. And history. Her gaze didn't flinch. Whose history? A small, electric pause. The kind that tightens the skin at the back of your neck. Miguel tapped his earpiece, then glanced toward the forward galley. A knock sounded from the cockpit door. It opened a few inches. The captain stepped out. Silver hair, shoulders straight, eyes that had learned the discipline of seeing the whole picture. The cabin breathed in as one. Good morning, he said, voice low, controlled. He didn't pretend the room wasn't charged. I'm Captain Ellison. We'll be resolving this before we move an inch. He gave the man a level look. Sir, your assigned seat is 14C. You will take it now. I paid good money. The man began, louder now, drawing courage from the attention. You think I'm moving because Because the rules apply to everyone, the captain said. No hurry, no heat, just gravity. A beat, too. The man's jaw worked. He didn't stand. The captain's radio crackled softly at his shoulder. He listened, nodded once. Then he looked at the young woman. Really looked, the way you look when recognition finally knocks. His expression shifted, respect folding into responsibility. He spoke into his sleeve, then to the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll have a brief delay. Please remain seated. The jet bridge door opened at the front with a metallic sigh. Cool air slipped into the cabin like a reprimand. 2 airport agents stepped aboard, brisk and polite. Behind them, a third figure in a dark suit paused at the threshold, scanning. Not aggressive. Alert. Phones lifted higher. Thumbs hovered. Heartbeats too. Olivia leaned toward the young woman. Do you want us to move you to 1A while we sort this? She asked gently. No, the young woman said, voice steady as a rail. I'll stay in my seat. The captain nodded to the dark-suited figure at the door. A murmured exchange. A glance. A small, deferential dip of the head toward 2A. The man in the blazer noticed. Something uncertain flickered across his face. The captain addressed him one last time. Sir. Final opportunity to comply. Silence bit down on the cabin. The plane held its breath. The dark-suited figure took a step forward. Then another, eyes never leaving the young woman. He spoke quietly, words meant for her and somehow for everyone. Ma'am, we received your call. Your team is on the jet bridge. The cabin tilted on that sentence, as if gravity itself had shifted. Who exactly was she? And why did the arrival of her team just stop a plane full of strangers in its tracks? The cabin felt heavier now, as though gravity had decided to press down harder on everyone's shoulders. The announcement of her team arriving lingered in the air like smoke after a firecracker. Sharp, unsettling, impossible to ignore. Passengers craned their necks, whispering in hurried breaths. Who is she? Why does she have a team? Is she famous? Every whisper carried a mix of curiosity and unease, feeding the silence until it became unbearable. The man in the navy blazer shifted in his seat, his smugness slipping like melting wax. For the first time since the confrontation began, his confidence wavered. The dark-suited figure near the door spoke quietly into a small device in his ear, then straightened. His eyes scanned the cabin one last time before focusing on her. Miss Daniels. He didn't speak loudly, but in the electric hush, every passenger heard his words. Ma'am, security detail has cleared the jet bridge. They're waiting on your instruction. Instruction. The word pulsed like thunder in the confined space. This wasn't just customer service. This wasn't standard protocol. This was something far larger, something that rewrote the power dynamics in the room with a single syllable. The man in the blazer laughed nervously. Security detail? For her. His voice cracked on the last word. He cleared his throat, tried again. This is ridiculous. They're overreacting. I mean, look at her. She's just... He trailed off, because every eye in the cabin was now turned on him. Not her. And in those stares was no sympathy, no agreement. Only a growing wave of disgust. Miss Daniels finally spoke, her voice steady, almost serene. You still think you understand who I am? The man blinked. You're just... She lifted her hand, stopping him with silence. The motion was graceful, effortless, yet it carried weight, as though she were conducting the air itself. For a long moment no one moved. Even the child in row stilled, wide-eyed, as though sensing the gravity. Then, slowly, she turned to the flight attendant, Olivia, who still stood protectively by her side. Can you bring me a glass of water, please? The request was ordinary. Too ordinary. Yet it was the most commanding thing anyone had heard in that cabin. Olivia nodded quickly and hurried away, relief flooding her face. Relief to have something normal to do, relief to obey. The man leaned closer, voice dropping to a harsh whisper meant only for her. Who do you think you are? You don't scare me. Her lips curved, not into a smile, but into something sharper. An almost invisible acknowledgement that his words no longer mattered. You should be asking yourself who you are, she murmured. The glass of water arrived. She took it with calm fingers, the ice clinking softly, and sipped as if she had all the time in the world. The sound of that sip seemed louder than the engines that had now gone completely quiet. Passengers held their breath. The man's hands trembled on his armrests. He wanted to protest, to reclaim control, but words stuck in his throat like stones. Finally, the captain returned, his expression carved from stone. He looked at the suited figure, then at her. Miss Daniels, your detail is requesting clearance to board. She set the glass down gently, the tiniest clink echoing like a bell in the tension-filled air. Then she nodded. Let them in. The door at the front opened with a hiss, and 3 men in identical suits stepped onto the plane. They didn't rush. They didn't shout. They moved with calm precision, the kind of presence that didn't need to prove itself. Their eyes scanned the cabin in seconds, sharp and efficient, then softened the moment they landed on her. Miss Daniels, one of them said, bowing his head slightly. Are you all right? I am, she replied simply. Then she tilted her head toward the man still glued to seat 2 as aisle partner. But he isn't. The man's face drained of color. Wait, what? What is this? I didn't do anything wrong. The first suited guard leaned forward, his voice low but unshakable. Sir, you need to remain calm. This is bigger than you realize. The man sputtered, eyes darting between the guards, the passengers, the captain, and finally back to her. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His power, once inflated like a balloon, was gone. All that remained was the shriveled silence of fear. Miss Daniels folded her hands in her lap, calm as ever. She didn't gloat. She didn't sneer. She simply waited, because sometimes the most powerful statement is patience. The passengers watched, spellbound. Phones hovered. History was being written in the cramped aisles of a delayed flight. And in that stillness, one thought gripped them all. Who exactly was she, and how far did her influence reach? The guards were here, the cabin frozen, and the truth was seconds away from being revealed. But the question everyone secretly feared was, what would happen to the man who tried to steal her seat? The cabin was so quiet, you could almost hear the hum of electricity in the overhead lights. The 3 suited guards stood like statues at the front, their presence shifting the air itself. The passengers leaned forward in their seats, as if gravity itself pulled them closer to the unfolding scene. Miss Daniels, still seated in 2A, sipped her water with elegance, her calmness a sharp contrast to the blazer-clad man trembling beside her. His jaw worked nervously, his tongue darting across dry lips. Every flicker of his eyes screamed the same question. Who is she? Finally, the captain cleared his throat, stepping closer, his eyes steady on the man. Sir, you've caused a delay. You've disrespected crew and passenger alike. But most of all, you've disrespected someone far above your understanding. The man forced a laugh, though it cracked midway. Far above me? Don't be ridiculous. She's just enough. The word came not from the captain, but from one of the guards. His voice was deep, quiet, and absolute. The kind of voice that made even the loudest man fall silent. Miss Daniels set her glass down and leaned slightly forward, her gaze pinning the man to his seat. You wanted to know who I am. A ripple of suspense ran through the passengers. The man opened his mouth but shut it again, throat tight. She continued, My name is Amara Daniels, daughter of Marcus Daniels, owner of the Daniels Group. You know that airline you're sitting in? She paused, letting her words hang like a blade over his arrogance. My father built it, and I inherited his shares. That means... She leaned closer, her voice now low enough to chill him. This isn't just a seat. This is my plane. A stunned silence fell. Someone gasped audibly in row 3. A woman whispered, Daniels Group? The billion-dollar empire. Another muttered, No wonder the security team came. The man's face turned white, then flushed deep red. He stammered, I didn't know. You didn't look. I mean... He stopped himself, realizing too late how ugly the excuse sounded. Miss Daniels' lips curled into a faint, ironic smile. Didn't look like what? Like I belonged. The word struck harder than a slap. Even the baby in row 4 whimpered, sensing the storm in her tone. The captain nodded respectfully toward her. Miss Daniels, your father is a man I've admired for years. It's an honor to have you aboard. She acknowledged him with a small nod, then turned back to the man. You measured me by my skin, by my clothes, by what you thought I couldn't afford. And yet, here we are. You exposed me, exactly where I belong. The man buried his face in his hands, sweat dripping down his temple. His voice was barely a whisper now. I'm sorry, but Miss Daniels didn't let him off so easily. Sorry isn't enough. You didn't just try to steal a seat. You tried to steal dignity. And that is far more expensive than a ticket. A heavy silence followed, broken only by the faint drone of an engine outside, still idle. Would she punish him, or would she show a grace he did not deserve? Every passenger held their breath. The man's apology still hung in the air, fragile, desperate, and hollow. The guards stood ready, waiting for her command. The captain looked to her, silently asking the same question everyone wanted answered. What happens now? Miss Daniels leaned back in her seat, her eyes softening, though her voice carried steel. You think an apology ends this? No. An apology without change is just noise. She let the silence linger. The cabin grew heavier, like the walls themselves were leaning in to listen. Finally, she stood. Her presence commanded attention. Every eye locked on her. She didn't need a crown or a title. Respect draped around her shoulders like a cloak woven from truth. Look around you, she said to the cabin, her voice steady, clear, and painfully human. How many of you have been judged by how you look? By the color of your skin, the clothes you wear, the job you hold? How many of you have been told you don't belong? A murmur swept through the passengers. Heads nodded. Eyes dropped. Invisible scars stirred in hearts that suddenly felt seen. She turned back to the man. You didn't just insult me. You insulted everyone who has ever been told they're not enough. You mocked every story of struggle, every quiet victory, every person who fought to sit where they earned the right to sit. The man shook his head, tears welling in his eyes now. Please, She raised her hand gently, silencing him once more. This lesson isn't for me. It's for you. And for them. She gestured to the passengers, her gaze sweeping the rows. Because seats can be stolen, money can be counted, but respect? She paused, letting the words sink into every heart. Respect is priceless, and it should be given before it's earned. A pin-drop silence followed. Then, slowly, she sat back down in 2A, reclaiming what was always hers. The captain cleared his throat, waiting for her decision. Miss Daniels, do you wish for us to remove this passenger and ground the flight? All eyes flicked to her. Would she demand retribution? Would she have him dragged out as a spectacle of his own arrogance? Miss Daniels closed her eyes briefly, as if listening to something beyond the cabin. Then she opened them again, serene. No, we'll take off. He stays. The man blinked in shock. You're letting me stay? I'm not letting you stay, she corrected softly. I'm letting you learn. You will sit in economy in the seat you paid for. And every time you hear the engines roar, every time the flight bumps in turbulence, every time you glance at this cabin, remember this moment. Remember that respect is not bought, and arrogance always crashes. Her words landed like scripture. The man nodded weakly, shoulders slumping, and rose to his feet. The guards guided him gently but firmly down the aisle toward row 14. Passengers' eyes followed him, but none with pity, only with the weight of the lesson he had been forced to carry. As he disappeared into economy, Miss Daniels turned back to her window. The engines roared to life once more, the plane finally ready to lift. Passengers exhaled collectively, like a storm had passed but left the air cleaner. Olivia, the flight attendant, leaned close. That was powerful, she whispered. Miss Daniels smiled faintly. Power isn't in revenge. It's in reminding people of their humanity. The plane began to taxi, the runway stretching ahead like a promise. The cabin felt lighter now, as though everyone had shared in something greater than themselves. Miss Daniels closed her eyes, calm at last. She didn't need applause. The silence of respect was enough. If you were Miss Daniels, what would you have done? Would you have shown mercy or demanded justice? Comment your thoughts below. Your voice might be the lesson someone else needs to hear.